Welcome to Nobody Told Me. I'm Jan Black.
And I'm Laura Owens. Happiness is our topic on this episode, and we're very happy to welcome best-selling author Gretchen Rubin to our show today. In her books, she draws from cutting-edge science, the wisdom of the ages, lessons from popular culture, and her own experiences to explore how we can make our lives happier, healthier, more productive, and more creative. Her latest book is called The Four Tendencies, the Indispensable Personality Profiles that reveal how to make your life better and other people's lives better too.
Gretchen, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm very happy to be talking to you.
In your early career, you were a lawyer. In fact, you clerked for Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. I'm wondering how you went from that career to being one of the foremost thinkers on happiness.
Well, it's funny because a lot of people first got to know me as a writer with my book, The Happiness Project, but I'm a good example of somebody working very hard for 10 years to become an overnight success. So when I switched out of law to be a writer, I had written 4 books by the time I hit on the subject of happiness, but then ever since then, I've written 4 or 5 more books, and they've all been on the subject of kind of happiness and habits, because this subject is just so inexhaustible.
It's the 10-year anniversary of the Happiness Project, and for those who aren't familiar with the book, can you please talk to us about it and explain a little bit about what prompted you to write it?
Well, I was having a very ordinary moment. I was in a crowded city bus in the pouring rain, and I had one of those rare opportunities for reflection that we often don't get in everyday life. And I looked out the window and I thought, what do I want anyway? And I thought, I want to be happy. But I realized I didn't spend any time thinking about whether I was happy or if I could be happier. And I thought, I should have a happiness project. And that was the words that came to my mind. And I ran out the next day to the library and got a giant stack of books to try to understand what is happiness. Can you influence your happiness? What would you do if you were going to try to make yourself happier? And I was going to just do it for myself. But it was such an inexhaustibly fascinating subject that at a certain point I thought, well, this should be my next book. I should write a book about my happiness project. And so to do that, I figured I'd do it for a year because a year felt long enough for real change, but not interminable. And for each month, I came up with an area of my life that I wanted to work in, an area where I thought I could be happier, and kind of figured out why I thought that would make me happier. And then I came up with a handful of kind of concrete, manageable resolutions that would carry me towards that aim. So if I wanted more energy, which is what I picked for January, it was about sleep, getting enough sleep, clearing clutter, which bizarrely from a lot of people is tied to feelings of energy, things like that, very concrete, manageable things.
So what is happiness then? After you've thought about this for so many years, how do you define it?
Well, as you said, I started my career in law and I spent, an entire semester arguing about contract. And if anything, happiness is a more elusive concept. There's something like 15 academic definitions of happiness. And I realized, scientists have to have like very precise definitions, but for regular people, it's like, some people say it's bliss or satisfaction or joy or well-being or peace or, contentment. And I think it's good that the word happiness is kind of loose enough to encompass all these different ideas. So I don't think it's that important to think about like what is happiness. I think it's more useful to think about being happier. So next week, next month, next year, what are the kinds of things that I could do that would make me happier? That feels easier to think about. And it also feels more useful than trying to get to like, what is happiness? You can never come to the end of that.
Right. But you do say that we all have a baseline happiness. And I thought that was fascinating because I'm somebody who's really struggled with depression. And I've always thought that my baseline happiness level was probably lower than other people's. Why are some people's higher than others? And is there anything we can do to improve that?
Absolutely. Well, research suggests that about 50% of happiness is genetically determined. Some people are born Tiggers and some people are born Eeyores, and we all have experienced that. Then about 10 to 20% is life circumstances. That's things like age, occupation, health, marital status, income, things like that. And then all the rest is very much influenced by our conscious thoughts and actions. And so I think it's almost easier to think about it as like a set range. So like a person's range could be from like 4 to 7, or a person's range could be like 7 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people are just like naturally coming at a different place. But the question is, given your own nature, can you push yourself up to the top of your range rather than letting yourself drift down to the bottom of your range? And it's interesting that you mentioned depression, because I feel like depression is really like a third category. I don't put it on the same scale as regular happiness and unhappiness. It's really something, it's very, very serious and should be treated as something very, very serious. But like a friend of mine said, she said, I'm a very, very happy person who suffers from depression. And I understood exactly what she meant by that. It's kind of, it's something that's, it's related, but it's not right, I think, on the same continuum.
So how would the strategies for somebody who does have depression be different for happiness than for somebody who doesn't?
Well, one of the things in the book, I don't talk about depression because I feel like that's a special, like that's kind of like a medical, that's not something within the range of my expertise.
Right.
But what I've heard, and I'm very explicit about that, but one of the things I've heard in the 10 years since the Happiness Project came out is that many people who do deal with depression have found that many of the things are very useful for them too, even if they're in depression or if they're trying to avoid going into a period of depression, things as simple as, making sure that you get enough sleep, making sure that you get out in the sunlight, making sure that you have regular connections with friends, making sure that you, manage your screen time. These are things that people who are not depressed worry about, but they're also very useful for people who are dealing with depression.
And you know what? Your book was one of the first that I bought when I was diagnosed with depression, and it was so helpful. And I just think reading that book gave me hope, actually.
Oh, well, that's great to hear. Yeah, I just take it very seriously, so I wouldn't want to, put myself out there as somebody.
Right.
But I'm thrilled to hear that it was useful to you.
Right,
Yeah.
and the Happiness Journal as well. I got that last year for Christmas, and I've written in it every single day. And I can't wait to see what it's going to look like in 5 years when I'm done with it.
People now bring them to this is the one sentence journal where you write one sentence every day. Because for a lot of people, that's like as much journal as they can do. A lot of people have that impulse to keep a journal, but it's not. But, are you going to sit down and write 5 pages on, beautiful notebook? No, but one sentence a lot of us can do. And now people will bring them to like book events, or if I'm doing like a live event for my podcast, they'll show them to me. And it's so fun to see all the different pens, and some of the writing small, some of it's big, people writing in the margins. It is a really fun thing to do.
Did you know that 88% of financially successful people read at least 30 minutes per day? Reading is the ultimate secret to success, and lots of people like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates credit their success directly to reading. The problem is, there's no time to read, right?
If you're like us, the list of books you want to read or those people suggest you read is never ending and always expanding. You simply don't have time to read them all. Our sponsor, Blinkist, has solved your long list of must-reads once and for all.
Blinkist is the only app that takes thousands of the best-selling nonfiction books and distills them down to their most impactful elements, so you can read or listen to them in under 15 minutes, all on your phone. I'm in the car a lot, and I like to listen to Blinkist when I'm driving.
I'm in the gym often, and Blinkist doubles the benefits I get from a workout. I exercise both my body and my brain.
Blinkist is adding new titles from best of lists, so you're always getting the most powerful ideas in a made-for-mobile format.
You'll find timeless classics like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and current bestsellers like You Are a Badass, How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life.
And right now, for a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer just for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/nobody to start your free 7-day trial.
That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist. Blinkist.com/nobody to start your free 7-day trial. You can cancel at any time.
Blinkist.com/nobody. Laura gave me your Happiness Project journal as a gift, and I have been writing in it every day. And I love the fact that you can just write down one sentence or, it's a wonderful way to really take stock of what happened in a day and really kind of separate maybe the negative feeling you had about the overwhelming day, but to find that nugget of happiness in there. It's a great way to do it. And why do you think journaling like that, even if you're just writing one sentence a day, is important?
I think it helps people make sense of what is happening to them. Often there's a lot of research showing that people that are kind of construct a narrative about what's going on and try to make sense of their experience, that helps people. I think as you say, many people use it as like a gratitude journal or like a highlight thing. And so because we have the negativity bias, which is that our attention is just naturally more captured by the negative, which is like if it bleeds, it leads on the news, or if you get criticism and praise in a work review, you remember the criticism better. And so something like the journal, like you say, can kind of force you to think, well, what was the best thing? What was the highlight? Or like people use it when their children are little, like something wonderful that happened in your life as a parent. At the time, you think, I will never forget this hilarious thing that my son said, but you do.
Uh-huh.
You do. You can't remember. And so and so I think a lot of time, and for me, for sure, I have a terrible memory of my life. I feel like I'm constantly trying to come up with easy, manageable ways to help me hold on to my experience better, because I feel like I just forget so much. And so something like this, it's manageable because it's one sentence. And then it is funny, I'm sure now that you both have done it for a while, you look back and it comes back. It like one sentence does kind of bring back a whole scene or a whole part of life that you've otherwise kind of forgotten. And I think that makes time feel more rich and vivid and meaningful when we feel like we can hang on to it and not in a random way, but in a highly intentional way.
Yeah, and I think too, when I'm struggling to find something different for my day, different and good for my day, it's really fun to look back and see what I picked for other days. And I think that kind of inspires me to think of other cool new things for that day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
One thing I love is like if I find in my office like an old to-do list, every once in a while I'll just find one that got like stuck in a book or something.
Right.
And you just see, oh my gosh, I remember when this was like the big worry, and it's all 5 years ago, or like, oh, that's over. I don't have to worry about that. There's just something about looking at these little things from the past. I think it's just very satisfying.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm wondering what you think the role is of our habits in determining whether we're happy or not. I know you've done a lot of work on that.
Well, I just think it's gigantically important. And, part of it is that research shows that about 40% of everyday life is shaped by habits. So habits are the invisible architecture of our daily existence. And we know, if we have habits that work for us, we're much more likely to be happier, healthier, more productive, and more creative. And if our habits don't work for us, then it's going to be a lot harder to do that. And one of the things I found after the Happiness Project came out is that often people very well know what would make them happier. They know they'd be happier if they got more sleep, or they exercised regularly, or they quit sugar, or they spent more time with their friends, or they spent more time reading, or whatever it is. So they knew what they wanted to do, but then they weren't doing it. And I was like, well, if you know that would make you happier, and it does make you happier when you do it, why aren't you able to do it consistently? And I realized a lot of times that it's a problem with habits, that if you want to change a habit, you have to do it in the way that's right for you. And sometimes people just don't go about it in the way that's right for them, and then they end up feeling discouraged or frustrated. So I thought, well, I'll write a book, which ended up being better than before, where I really look at, well, how do people successfully master their habits? So that if you figure out what it is that you want to do to make yourself happier, all the strategies that you could use to try to get that habit to take shape in your life.
And what was the most important thing you learned about how people stick to habits or resolutions?
The most important thing, absolutely, is that there is no magic one-size-fits-all solution. So many experts are like, start small, do it for 30 days, give yourself a cheat day, do it first thing in the morning. This is the answer. No. All of those work well for some people. All of those do not work at all for some people. There is no magic one-size-fits-all solution. When I looked at it, I identified 21 strategies that people use to make and break habits. And sometimes people are like, 21's too many, give me the top 3. But there are no top 3 because it all depends on each one of us. So some of these strategies work really well for some people, but don't work at all for other people. Some work for just about everyone. Some are available to us at some times in our lives, but not at all times. And so the thing is, I think, look at all 21 and then you think, well, when have I succeeded in the past? What appeals to me? What kind of person am I? And then you can go about approaching a habit in the way that's right for you. Because I think a lot of times people are like, my sister-in-law does this. If I can't do it the way she does it, there's something wrong with me. I have no willpower. I have no self-control. I can never take time for myself. That's my problem. And I'm like, no, it's not that. a lot of people have the same frustration you do. Let's set it up in a different way. There's a lot of ways to achieve your aims. Let's come at the habit in a way that's suited to your individual nature, and then it's a lot easier. So that's why there's so many, because you have to think of all the possibilities. And that's good, because it means you have there's a lot that you can choose from if you're trying to build a habit in yourself.
How much of a role do you think worry plays in determining whether we experience happiness?
Worry?
Worry.
Interesting. Probably a lot. Some people are just temperamentally more anxious than others. So I think, and part of it too is, do you use your worry to guide your actions and to prompt you to do things that would then alleviate your worry, or do you ruminate? A lot of people have a tendency to have racing thoughts, or worrying about things that they can't control, or worrying about things that are going to unfold, and so part of it is understanding how to use worry as an engine for change in a way that's useful, because it's good. Some worry is good. If you had no worry, you would be very reckless, and not have any planning or forethought, and that would be bad. But you don't want to let it overtake you, for sure. Yeah.
I love how you talk about spontaneous trait transfer. Can you explain why gossip is so toxic related to that?
Well, but you can use spontaneous trait transfer positively too. So spontaneous trait transfer is this fascinating thing where it turns out that our brains are not that good at making fine distinctions. And so if I say to you, "Oh my gosh, I work with the most brilliant manager. This person, I've never worked with somebody like this. The leadership that she shows, the vision that she demonstrates, it's like we can't believe it." In my mind, you are going to start to associate those qualities with me because I'm talking about it and you're thinking about it. And even though I'm describing someone else, you're going to associate with me. On the other hand, if I'm saying things like, "Oh my gosh, you're not going to believe my mother-in-law. She is so crazy. She's so petty. I'm going to start thinking, I'm going to start associating those qualities with you because that's what you're talking about. So what you say, it really reflects back on you, even when you're talking about someone very different. So, and I've experienced this in my life. I have a friend who everybody she meets is like the most brilliant, the most creative. And I was like, who are these people that she meets? I never meet people like this. And I really associated it with her, and it kind of really did rub off on her, I realized. And when I read about spontaneous trait transfer, I was like, oh, now I get it.
What are some of the latest findings from the world of science in terms of happiness, the latest research, the things that you are really interested in?
Well, what's interesting about happiness is it's too important to be new. There are no startling new findings, I think, in happiness because the greatest minds in all of human nature have been thinking about this for thousands of years. And it's very funny. I'm a huge fan of the 18th century essayist Samuel Johnson, Dr. Johnson. And what's funny is you'll read something like groundbreaking study. This is the hugest thing. And ta-da! And then I'll read an essay written by Samuel Johnson where in his ye olde English language, he talks about exactly the same thing. So I think a lot of the research is definitely confirming or putting nuance on things. But for something ancient philosophers and contemporary scientists agree over and over again, and every study shows it, relationships are a key to happiness. If you want people who have more relationships are happier than people who have fewer relationships. People need deep relationships, intimate bonds, enduring, where they can confide an important secret, where they feel like they can get support and give support. And this is something that contemporary science is studying, and this is something that's been talked about, throughout the ages. The importance of novelty and challenge. This is something that was very surprising to me when I was looking at the research, because I was like, I like familiarity and mastery. I don't want novelty and challenge. This is something that research now is very much showing to be true. This is something that has been talked about, throughout the centuries. So I think, it's fascinating to see how the research can kind of push it. But for the most part, I don't think that there's anything too startling. Stuff that's startling is probably questionable.
In the last 10 years, since the Happiness Project was published, I feel like social media has become a lot more important to people. And I
Yeah.
feel like it really has an impact on my happiness. And I know my friends and family's happiness as well. And it's so addictive to look at social media, to look at Facebook and Instagram. And I formed these habits of looking at it. And
Yeah.
I really think it does impact my day-to-day happiness. What do
Yeah.
you think?
Talking about new research, this is something that's of tremendous interest to researchers. So there's a lot of examination of this, and as you say, it's kind of a new thing to look at. They weren't talking about this 500 years ago, but I think the general principles are true, which are that technology is an amplifier of human nature. So it takes what's there. The good is good and the bad is bad. And I think I think in terms of managing our own happiness as we use these devices and tools is to remember that we are the master. Technology is a great servant, but it is a very bad master, and we are the master. It's not Facebook making you feel that way. It's not Pinterest's fault. It's you. It's you who's using these tools, and you're in charge. And I think more and more people are saying, I'm going to figure out how to use my notifications. I'm going to figure out how to use something like Freedom, that software where it shuts down your internet for certain times of the day so you don't feel. I'm going to put my phone up on a high shelf so that I can't get it. This is a great trick. If you're addicted to your cell phone, put it on grayscale, which is when it's just black and white and gray. And believe me, you're not going to be as transfixed by your Instagram if it's in black, white, and gray. It makes it feel much more like a utility. So I think a lot of it is figuring out, or like taking the app off your phone if you're checking something on your phone all the time. So you can do it from your desktop. I've heard of people where they wanted to take a break from something, but they didn't want to delete an account because that's a big step. So they would have like a sweetheart or a friend change their password. So then it's like, well, I can't look at that for a while because I can't get into my account, but I know that the account is still there. And when I want to, I'll just say, hey, give me my password. I'm ready to go back in. So I think a lot of it is really thinking, well, how is this making me feel? Is this making me feel worse? I want to stay do I want to limit who I'm seeing? I want to take control, curate it that more. Maybe I want to have fewer people in my feed. I don't like all this stuff that's coming in. But I think it's a challenge because it is. I think people are used to sort of using it passively, where now it's much more like, yeah, you got to get in there and kind of control it because you're right. It's created to be addictive. The greatest minds in technology are trying to get you to push that button, and they're good at it. So you gotta be on your toes to figure out how to push back.
But don't you think that social media can also create happiness in your life?
100%. Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of it because of relationships. I think they're great because you can have so many more loose, there's a lot of research about the importance of weak ties and how the people who are on the very edges of your circles often are the people who find you jobs because all the people close to you know all the same stuff you do. It's the weak ties that can get you can introduce you to your new sweetheart or whatever because they know different people from you. So, and I think that's so much easier to manage. There's all different kinds of friendship. Maybe there's somebody from high school that you don't necessarily want to go out to dinner with them even, but they still have a place in your heart. You're still interested in knowing kind of what's going on with them in a light touch kind of way. A great way, email, if you consider email part of this. My family, my sister and my parents, we have this thing called Update, which is like every 5 days or 10 days, we send each other an email that says the subject line is update. And the theme of the update is it's okay to be boring. We talk about this a lot on the podcast, Happier. And you just write them as boring details of your day. It's like my mother's like, I'm getting my hair colored. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm like, I have a dentist appointment. But we feel so much more connected when we know just like this minutia. And you don't answer update. So there's no work to be done. You don't have to be clever. It's just, we want to know what we're doing. What are you up to in the most basic way? And with email, and I've heard of people doing this on group text. I've heard of people having private Facebook groups. I've heard of people doing it. There's all different ways. It's whatever works for your group. But it's a great example of how used wisely, exactly as you say, technology can be a wonderful tool because it can make a lot of kinds of things easier and more rich.
On a different note, you say that one of your favorite things that you've written in the last 10 years since the Happiness Project came out was called The Years Are Short. And it's not
Yep.
even 2 minutes long, but it's so powerful and it's
Oh,
available to watch on YouTube. For
yeah.
those who aren't familiar with it, could you explain the story behind it and how you came to that beautiful conclusion that the days are long, but the years are short?
Yes, of everything I've ever written, I think that line resonates most with people. So I realized, because I used to take, this is my older daughter who's now a sophomore in college. So this is more true than it is, very, very true for me. We used to take the city bus to her nursery school because she was too little to walk. And every day, and we would, go and we'd wait on the bus stop, and I would think, and then when we didn't have to go, it was always like a treat, like, oh, today she's off from school, we don't have to take the bus. And then one day we were there, and she points out the window to a dog, just like a dog. She's so little. It's just like a dog is like massive, celebrity sighting. It's like a dog. And I realized, like, I was thinking like the bus ride was just this throwaway time, but the bus ride was everything. That was my daughter's childhood. That was my experience of motherhood, was the bus ride, and that I should never take it for granted. And of course now that bus ride is so far in the past. Mm-hmm. So, but when at any point you're like, ugh, to get from getting out of bed in the morning to going back to bed at night feels like, oh my God, how can I live such a long day? But then the year passes in a flash.
Yeah, yeah. In another recent blog, you wrote about 30 things you do when you're feeling blue and you want to make yourself happier. You don't have to outline the 30 things right now, but what are some of those things that we could maybe relate to?
If you're having sort of an emergency and you need like an emergency intervention, one thing, and I think people know this, is listen to your favorite upbeat song. That is a great, very easy way to lift your spirits. One of my favorites is to do 10 jumping jacks, or anything where you get your feet off the ground. It's kind of playful and fun and youthful. If you run down the stairs or you jump over a puddle. But if my kids are feeling blue, I'm like, give me 10 jumping jacks. And there's just something kind of goofy about it. It makes you feel happier. One thing is to go outside. We're very, very, it turns out that sunlight is very important to kind of the healthfulness of the body and the regulation of the body. And if you go outside, even on a very overcast day, it's brighter outside than it would be in the most brightly lit room inside. And just the fresh air, like the change of scenery, and getting that sunlight into your face, especially if it's in the morning, is really going to help make you feel more alert, wake you up. So those are some of the manage mild pain. I think this is something that can really drag us down without us really realizing it. So, like you're a little bit hot or you're a little bit cold. So many offices are so cold. Light is a big thing. If you make a salute and you feel relief in your eyes, like your eyes feel like a sense of relief, that means there's too much light coming into your face, so it's sort of a constant strain. Taking pain reliever, making sure that you're not too hungry or too thirsty, because I think this like persistent, nagging, low-level pain really wears us down, kind of makes us less patient, takes away your sense of humor, makes everything seem harder. So those are some things that you can do if you need a quick lift.
Gretchen, our show is called Nobody Told Me, and at the end of each show, we ask our guests, what is your Nobody Told Me lesson? What is it that nobody could have told you about happiness that would have made your life a lot easier?
I mean, nobody told me how much you just have to figure it out for yourself, that everyone's happiness project is different, that everyone has a different nature, different interests, different values, different temperament, and that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. You can't go to the library and look it up in a book because nobody can tell you what you have to figure it out for yourself. It's the constant challenge of our lives, I think, is to understand ourselves and to figure out what are the things that we could do to make ourselves happier. When I started out, I thought everybody could just tell me the answers. And now I find out, we all got to figure out those answers for ourselves.
Yeah. Gretchen, how can people connect with you on social media and find out more about your podcast?
Yes, I am everywhere on social media under the name Gretchen Rubin, and I have a website called GretchenRubin.com, where there's tons about my books, and there's a lot of resources if you want discussion guides or all kinds of charts and helpful nutshell guides and all sorts of stuff. Plus, I write there a lot about my adventures and happiness and habits, and have a lot of fun things there. My podcast, as you mentioned, is called Happier with Gretchen Rubin, and spoiler alert, it's about how to be happier. And I do that with my sister, who's a TV writer in Los Angeles. So she's my co-host, and so we talk about like strategies and tips and insights about how to be happier. And I love to connect with readers and listeners and viewers. So if you have any insights or questions or observations, I can be reached in a million different ways, and I love to hear what people are thinking.
And have you decided what your next book is going to be about?
Well, in March, I have a book coming out called Outer Order, Inner Calm. And it's about, because one of my kind of secrets of adulthood is that for most people, outer order contributes to inner calm. And so many people are like, that's so true for me. And I certainly feel that way myself. A friend of mine once said, I finally cleaned out my fridge, and now I know I can switch careers. And I thought, I know how that feels.
Yeah.
And so it's all about kind of why do we have this connection for most people between outer order and inner calm, and then how do you go about creating that outer order? And it's a fun little book. It's like a psych up book. Lots of ideas that you can just quickly go through and pick and choose the ones that like get you fired up to clear clutter. So Outer Order, Inner Calm is coming out in March.
I can't wait. I need that.
It's a fun book to write.
I need that right now.
Good. One of my favorite things is to come over and help my friends clear their clutter. So it's a good thing I'm not within easy reach, or I'd invite myself over. My sister says I'm a happiness bully.
You wouldn't like to see my place. I guess I could be a lot happier if you look at that.
Mine too. We'll pay for your plane ticket.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, nothing would give me more pleasure. It's so much more fun to clean other people's clutter because it doesn't have all the emotional weight. It's like
exactly.
It's like no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Gretchen, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it was so much fun to talk to you. Thank you.
Our thanks to Gretchen Rubin, and again, you can find out more about her work at GretchenRubin.com. I'm Jan Black.
And I'm Laura Owens.
You're listening to Nobody Told Me. Thank you so much for joining us.